Sunday evenings have a particular smell, the sharpness of detergent from people washing clothes, the faint spice drifting up from someone else's kitchen, and that thin ribbon of melancholy that settles between the streetlights. For 3 years I've sat in this same plastic chair by my window, waiting for a ringtone that never comes. When my daughter left, she laughed at my worry. "Don't worry, Mom, I'll call every Sunday," she had said, clicking her suitcase shut as if sealing a promise inside. Every Sunday I make the same tea, pour it into the second cup by habit, and then remember. I drink both cups now, one for her, one for my foolish hope. The phone rests on the table like a pet that stopped waiting for attention. It lights up for spam calls, delivery confirmations, festival greetings from banks, everyone except Ria. Sometimes, when an unknown number flashes, my heart trembles, but it's never her. I've even started hating the sound of other people's phones ringing through my open window. Neighbors call from the street below, "Auntie Mira, tea ready?" Their voices kind but pitying. I smile, wave, then close the window again. They think I've become used to living alone, that I'm one of those women who loves peace and plants more than company. But peace has never lived here, only waiting does. The calendar on the wall bleeds red circles over every missed Sunday. 1, 2, 157 marks. In the beginning, I scolded her in my mind. "She's busy. Give her time." Later I pleaded silently. "Just one call, Beta, tell me you're fine." Now I whisper nothing at all. Silence has taught me that even hope gets tired. Outside, the tailor shop below closes for the day. Mr. Patel locks his shutters. The clang echoes up the staircase and through my ribs like a bell ending the week. I switch off the kitchen light. Only the blue glow from my idle phone watches me back. 3 years. 1,000 unspoken sentences. And still, every Sunday night, I lift the receiver, not to dial "it's disconnected," but to hold it near my ear, to remember the sound of her breathing at the other end. Morning always begins with the hiss of the iron from the shop below. The smell of scorched fabric seeps through the floorboards before I'm fully awake. Mr. Patel's apprentice hums film songs, beating the stillness that fills my room. I rise at 6, make tea, water the 3 plants lined along my window, wipe away yesterday's dust. Routine is kinder than memory. It gives me instructions and leaves little space to think. The street begins to stir, milk vendor, newspaper boy, the clinking of steel gates. When people see me on the balcony, they wave and greet me like a clock tower, reliable, predictable, harmless. I wave back. It's easier to play the part of the cheerful widow than explain the ache sitting quietly beside every smile. At 7 I cook breakfast for one. Sometimes I forget and take out 2 plates, then I laugh at myself and wash the extra. Old habits cling like cobwebs. The radio keeps me company. The hosts gossip about movie stars and lottery winners. I nod as if included in their conversation. I even catch myself answering aloud, just to hear another voice inside the apartment. Twice a week I visit the market. The vegetable seller calls out, "Auntie Mira, today's tomatoes look at least as fresh as you." I roll my eyes, pretend to laugh, hand him exact change. I always buy a little more than I need. Cooking for one feels like admitting defeat, yet wasting food feels worse. So I portion everything into glass jars, neat rows of a life under control. Afternoons are slow. I sew small mending jobs for Patel and Sons, buttons, torn sleeves, the sort of invisible labor no one notices. The regular orders keep me busy and quietly proud. Every stitch is a heartbeat filled with "yes, I'm still useful." After dusk I sweep the hallway, then sit by the window to watch other apartments light up. Families speak over dinner, televisions laugh through thin walls, the smell of fried onions travels insistently. That smell always finds me. It reminds me of Ria's favorite snack, onion fritters with extra chili. I still make them sometimes, though greasy fingers and silence are a strange combination. On good days, I talk to Mrs. Fernandez from next door. She brings leftover cake and endless gossip. Her husband died 5 years ago, yet she speaks of him as if he's away on a trip. Maybe it's her way of softening the edges of reality, Maybe mine is pretending Ria's just busy. At night I read old postcards my daughter wrote from school trips. Her handwriting slants to the right as if trying to race into the future. I climbed a hill today, Mom. The air is different up here. That hill must have looked like possibility to her. To me now, it looks like distance. When lights in the building finally dim, I sit under the fan's slow blades, notebook open, writing lists that mean nothing. Wash curtains, repair balcony latch, buy tea leaves, wait, crossed out, then written again. People think loneliness is a howl. It isn't. It's the low hum of everything continuing without you. Before sleep, I whisper a single prayer, not for her return, but for her peace. I tell myself good mothers want freedom for their children, not chains of guilt. Still, each night I listen to the echo of my own words bouncing off empty walls and wonder, if she truly were happy, wouldn't that happiness find some way to call me? It happened 3 years ago on a bright Tuesday morning that should have looked ordinary. The kind of day when laundry flutters above balconies, buses hiss at every corner, and nothing in the air warns you that your life is about to divide itself into a before and after. Ria's suitcase was already near the door, a glossy blue one with wheels that clicked against the tiles like a countdown. She had packed it 3 different times the night before, repacking as if arranging her new life inside that box: shirts, heels, optimism. I had stood in the doorway of her room. She called it my workspace. The posters on the wall were half peeled, leftover tape marks shaped like dreams that had moved on ahead of her. "Don't worry, Mom, I'll call every Sunday," she said again while checking for her charger. I tried to sound casual. "Sunday, Monday, any day works. Just call." She smiled distractedly. "You'll get bored of me in a week." Bored. The word pricked me. People get bored of television, not their children. But I said nothing. The excitement in her eyes was something fragile, made of light and fear. I didn't want to break it with my worries. When the cab arrived, the driver honked twice, a sharp, impatient sound that still echoes inside me. Ria pulled the handle of her suitcase, struggling with the uneven step at our porch. "Let me help," I offered. "No, Mom, I've got it," she said, half laughing, half proving a point. Independence has that sound, a forced laugh over a crack of nerves. At the gate she turned briefly to take one last look. I wanted that moment to stretch, just a small hug that might hold all the unspoken advice of mothers: eat well, stay safe, don't lose your kindness. But she was already waving goodbye, hair blowing forward, blocking half her face. "Text me when you reach," I called out. She nodded, sliding into the cab. The door thudded shut, the single syllable that began my silence. I remember the road glare bouncing off the hood as the car started. My reflection in the windshield looked older than I felt, a woman in a faded apron holding a half-folded towel, staring at her own child's future moving away. The cab turned at the corner and vanished among buses and delivery vans. For a moment I thought she might stop, wave again. She didn't. I stood there until the neighbor's child tugged at my sleeve and asked, "Auntie, did Dee go to America?" "No, Beta, just to the city." "Is it far?" "Yes," I said. "Far enough." That evening I cooked her favorite meal, cardi and rice, too much gravy, too little appetite. I left her plate covered on the table, as if she might walk in complaining about the spice level. When the phone buzzed at 9 o'clock, my heart jumped, but it was only a promotional message promising a free recharge. I laughed then, a hollow, sharp laugh that bounced off the ceiling fan blades. I tried to sleep, but every sound grew louder: the ticking clock, dripping tap, even my heartbeat, as though the house itself was rehearsing her absence. The next morning I found a note on the kitchen counter. Just 5 words in her rushing handwriting: "Love you, Mom. Be good. Be good." What did that even mean? I wasn't a misbehaving child. Maybe she meant be strong. Maybe she meant don't cry. Or maybe she didn't mean anything at all, because when you're leaving, you always say small things to hide big emotions. That note still hangs by a magnet on my fridge door. The ink has blurred slightly from years of kitchen steam, but I read it every time I open the fridge as if food alone could fill what's missing. When people ask why she left, I say proudly, job opportunity. My daughter's doing well. They nod, imagining shiny offices and modern apartments. None of them ask if she calls. Maybe they know not to, maybe they already hear the pause in my voice when I say her name. That Tuesday morning was the last day our voices overlapped in the same room. Every day since then feels like an echo of that cab driving away, the sound of its wheels rolling over my heart before disappearing into grown-up silence. The first few days after Ria left were full of echoes that pretended to be sounds. The clatter of her breakfast cup in my memory, the sneeze that never followed the chill wind, the imagined hum of her hair dryer at 7 every morning. I had lived years in this apartment with noise. I never realized silence had its own vocabulary. Every corner started speaking. The loose window latch that clicked once in a while felt like someone knocking. The dripping kitchen tap counted out my loneliness drop by drop. At night the fan blades chopped the air into soft sighs. I began talking back to everything, thanking kettles for boiling, scolding curtains for not opening evenly, apologizing to the cupboard when I bumped into it. At first I laughed at myself, later I stopped noticing. On the 15th day I noticed dust gathering on Ria's bookshelf. My hands trembled as I picked up one of her diaries, the pink one with a broken lock she had kept since school. I didn't open it. I was too afraid I'd find happiness inside, pages bursting with her new world. I dusted the cover gently and put it back. The house smelled of detergent and emptiness. People think loneliness is invisible, but it smells like damp clothes left overnight. To fight it, I kept busy. The walls that had always felt sturdy suddenly looked tired, so I washed them with soap water. The more I scrubbed, the angrier I became at her for leaving, at myself for letting her. When my arms tired, anger turned into tears. The watermarks stayed on the wall like witnesses. Sunday came again. I sat with my phone on the dining table, its silent black screen reflecting my own face. I told myself not to stare, not to wait. Yet every vibration from the street kids running, a scooter backfiring, made my heart jump. I even answered a wrong number just to hear the word hello. Evenings were worst. I'd see shadows move across the curtains from neighboring apartments. Laughter traveled easily through thin walls, like a language I once knew but couldn't speak anymore. Sometimes Mrs. Fernandez would knock just to make sure I had eaten. I would open the door with a forced smile and an excuse ready. Yes, I was just finishing dinner. The truth was the food went cold more often than not. Appetite cannot live where joy has starved. I started keeping the television on for company, but voices from strangers cannot carry warmth. They just remind you that someone somewhere is being heard. To sleep, I played old recordings on my phone, little videos of Ria at graduation, birthday songs sung off-key, the two of us arguing about the right way to fold bedsheets. Repetition dulled the pain like pressing on a bruise until it numbs. Days stretched and folded into weeks. I learned to ration emotions the way people ration gas during shortages, small flames, just enough to survive. One night, electricity cut out across the block. The sudden darkness made me fumble toward the candles. As I struck the match, I caught sight of our reflection in the mirror, a lone woman and 2 teacups on the table behind her. The second cup still sat there from the morning. I laughed quietly. "You win, Ria," I said to the air. "I can't throw your cup away." Outside, rain began tapping on the balcony railing. It was the same rain she'd always hated, the one that made her complain about frizzy hair. I stood at the doorway watching drops hit the ground, wondering if the same rain was touching her somewhere far away. Maybe we were standing under the same grey. Maybe that was the closest thing we had to a conversation. By the 3rd month, silence had molded itself around me like a second skin. I went through days without speaking more than 3 sentences aloud. But inside my head, conversations roared, the what ifs, the whys, the rewinding of small last moments. That was the noise of my empty house, not from outside, but from inside my head, a crowd of memories, all whispering the same question I didn't know how to answer. What if she never calls at all? The rain that evening had a different rhythm, thicker, slower, as if it were thinking. Power flickered twice and went out completely. In the yellow matchlight, the house looked aged, like an old photograph someone forgot to frame. I was standing near the window counting seconds between thunderclaps when I heard the knock. 3 dull thuds, uncertain, as though the visitor wasn't sure I'd answer. No one ever came this late. My heart began to sprint ahead of me. When I opened the door, a young courier driver stood dripping, water running down his jacket, cardboard parcel clutched under his arm. "Are you Meera Singh?" he asked, squinting at his phone screen. "Yes." He handed over a small padded envelope sealed in plastic. "Sign here, Auntie." I signed. He hesitated. "Your daughter left this with our office 3 months ago. It got misrouted." Before I could ask more, he was already dashing down the stairs through the curtain of rain. The echo of his boots faded, leaving the faint sound of dripping water from the landing. I stood there staring at the package. No return address, just my name written in Ria's long, slanted handwriting, the kind that always leaned forward like it was in a hurry. Inside was a small metal key, the simple kind you get cut at any roadside kiosk, tied with a bit of red thread. A folded scrap of paper was taped to it. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. "If you ever need warmth, use this." Ah, that was all. No phone number. No explanation. Just that single line. I read it under the candle 3 times. The words felt whispered, not written. If you ever need warmth. Why would she write that? A key to what? She didn't have another apartment, at least not that I knew of. I turned the key over in my palm. It was dull silver, slightly bent at the edges, so ordinary it looked mysterious. I pressed it against my chest and closed my fist around it, feeling the cold bite into my skin. Maybe it was symbolic. Maybe she was telling me that the door between us wasn't locked forever. Or maybe it actually opened something. For an hour I sat at the table staring at that key as thunder rolled outside. My mind began crafting possibilities as wild as any monsoon lightning. She was sick. She was in trouble. She wanted me to find her. Each theory built itself, then crumbled, leaving the same silence behind. I rubbed my eyes and went to set the key on the shelf next to her old photos. When the candle flickered, the light hit the picture of Ria at graduation. She was smiling then, one hand raised in mock irritation as I clicked the photo. Her smile didn't belong to this darkness. Sleep escaped me, so I brewed tea, the cure for everything and nothing. Sitting at the small kitchen table, I placed the key beside the cup. Steam, silver, and questions filled the space between us. By midnight the rain softened into drizzle. I wrapped the key in tissue and slipped it into my blouse pocket, the way mothers keep small talismans when children travel. A ridiculous gesture maybe, but somehow it felt like protection. The next morning, the street smelled of wet dust and new beginnings. I half expected another knock, someone to explain, but none came. Instead a note had been slid under my door. In hurried handwriting, "Your daughter came by last week asking if you still live here." I said yes. She looked different. "Thought you should know. Lal Singh, landlord." I read it over and over until the words blurred. She had been here. Last week. While I was out buying detergent or begging the ceiling fan to stop squeaking, she had stood outside this same door, perhaps holding that same key, maybe even pressing the bell once, twice, then losing courage. I looked around my small apartment, the painted walls, the untouched cup, the second spoon on the counter. For the first time in years, every object seemed to lean forward expectantly, like listeners at the start of a story. A key. A message about warmth. A sighting. After years of stillness, the world had finally shifted by half an inch. And I knew, with a clarity that both thrilled and frightened me, that the next move had to be mine. The morning after the landlord's note, I unfolded my old cloth handbag, slipped the mysterious key inside, and stood before the mirror longer than usual. I didn't recognize the woman in the glass, creased cerise, faint rings under the eyes, but a spark so steady it almost frightened me. 3 years of waiting had slowed my feet, but one small piece of metal had woken them again. "Ria," I whispered into the mirror, "let's see what you've done this time." I took the early train to the city, the same line I'd once used for office clerical work in my 20s. Now the stations looked tighter, louder, young people stared at screens instead of faces. I clutched my purse as if it contained oxygen. Her last known address was on the employment form she had filled before leaving a small apartment near Carter Road. The building stood tall and tired, paint peeling like forgotten promises. I asked the watchman, "Ria Singh, flat 12C?" He shook his head. "Left last year, madam. Didn't pay full deposit. New tenants now. Do you know where she went?" He scratched his chin, searching memory for a clue worth 10 rupees of curiosity. "No, but she used to get mail from some foundation. Helping Hands or something. Helping Hands." I wrote it on a piece of paper that fluttered in the wind like hope. I wandered to the nearest cafe to gather courage and look for more hints. The waitress, a student with tattoos on her wrists, placed a cup of too strong coffee before me. "You look lost, auntie. You okay?" "My daughter used to live nearby. I'm trying to find her. City eats people fast," she said, half kind, half cynical. "If you find her, tell her she's lucky." Outside, the sky turned the exact grey of aluminum pans after heavy rain. I followed a memory rather than directions, walking to the office block she had once mentioned. The receptionist checked the old records and said, "Ria Singh, yes, she worked in PR. But that company shut down months ago. Honestly, everyone scattered. Failure could have sent me back home, but the note in my pocket kept burning like a small candle. If you ever need warmth." By late afternoon I stood at a payphone kiosk, calling the number listed for Helping Hands Foundation. The man at the other end answered cheerfully, "Helping Hands, good evening. Hello, my name is Meera Singh. My daughter might have volunteered with you." "Ria Singh." A pause, long enough for my heartbeat to double. "Could you hold, I waited through static and the rattle of coins settling in the machine. Then a woman's voice, warmer, slower. "Mrs. Singh. This is Anjali, coordinator here. Yes, Ria worked with us. Why don't you come by? We can talk." The address she gave lay across town. 2 buses later, I reached a narrower street lined with banyan trees. The shelter looked modest, cream walls stained by rain, a sign peeling at the edges. Children's laughter floated through open windows. A young social worker guided me to a small office with mismatched chairs. Files towered like small cities on the desk. Anjali rose and smiled gently. "You must be Ria's mother." Something trembled through me, the relief of hearing her name spoken kindly. "Yes." "Is she here?" She was. She left about a month ago to work at another center, we think in the Southern District. I must have looked stricken because she added quickly, "But she's doing good work. Your daughter helped many here." She never talked about family, only that she hoped one day you'd feel proud. My throat tightened. "Do you know what this opens?" I placed the small key on the table. Anjali looked at it for a moment, then smiled faintly. "That's one of ours. It opens the storeroom where volunteers keep donated blankets. She used to lock it every night herself. Said warmth should be kept safe." Warmth. The word sank deep. "She left a note for you," Anjali continued, pulling an envelope from a drawer. "She said you might come someday." For a moment I couldn't move. The sound of children singing in another room filled the air. It felt like blessings brushing against my ears. I reached for the envelope, hands shaking. "Thank you," I whispered. When I stepped outside, the evening sun was melting between clouds. I sat on the concrete step with the letter pressed against my chest. People hurried past, office workers, scavengers, a woman balancing vegetables on her head, but for me time had stopped right there between the rustle of paper and the thud of my heartbeat. I didn't open it immediately. I wanted to find a quiet place first, far from the city's noise, somewhere the words could land softly. Down the street, a small park shimmered under sodium lamps. I chose the farthest bench, dusted water drops away, and sat down. The packet trembled like a living creature in my hands. I closed my eyes, breathed once, twice, then tore the edge gently. Inside was a sheet of lined notebook paper folded carefully and a small photograph. Before reading, I looked at the picture, Ria in simple clothes, hair tied back, arms around two children, smiling in a way I hadn't seen since she was little, free from mirrors, free from ambition. The lump in my throat tasted of rust and salt. I unfolded the page. The first word blurred before I could finish reading it, Ma. The paper smelled faintly of soap and notebook dust. Her handwriting was smaller than I remembered, careful, like someone trying to stay within lines she once ignored. The first word shimmered beneath a tear that had dried long before I found it. Ma, if you're reading this, it means you found the key. It never opened a door to a mansion, only a storeroom full of blankets. I wanted warmth to wait for you here in case you ever came. I paused. Even her words carried weight like wool. I'm sorry I disappeared without explaining. The city felt like a promise that dissolved faster than rain on hot pavement. At first, things went well. I had a flat, a job, people who laughed too loudly and made me feel grown up. But when the company closed, everyone vanished. Friends turned into numbers that never picked up. I couldn't call you, Ma, not because I didn't want to, but because I was ashamed. How do you tell your mother that the world she prayed would love you has already thrown you out? My throat closed. I folded the letter halfway and stared at the photo again. For a few months, I lived in a paying guest room. When savings disappeared, so did the roof. I slept 2 nights in a railway waiting room. That's where I met Sister Anjali from the shelter. She gave me tea and blankets, and asked me to help serve breakfast to the children. At first, it was just a way to feel useful again. Then something changed. The children smiled at me, not the way clients smile when they want a report, but like they saw me, not my failures. Her confession unfolded in careful rhythms, neither begging nor boasting. I stayed. I wash dishes, keep records, teach small English classes. Some days I feel proud, some days small, but all the days honest. I didn't write earlier because I promised myself I'd contact you only once I could call from a place worth inviting you to. Maybe that was foolish. You never asked for success, you just wanted my voice. I know that now. I pressed the paper to my lips as if that could bridge 3 stolen years. Ma, please don't think I forgot you. I thought of home every night I cut vegetables or folded sheets. Every thunderstorm sounded like our roof tapping for attention. Every smell of cardamom tea took me back to your kitchen. I'm safe, Ma. Safer than ever. I have a small bed, 3 students who call me Dee, and a purpose. If you ever need warmth, real warmth, not just from quilts, you can find me here. The staff know my name. They'll call me. At the bottom she had drawn a tiny heart followed by, R. That was all. No address beyond the shelter's name, no request, no apology to soothe me or twist guilt back into motherhood, just truth, plain and soft. I reread it until I could recite each line from memory. Somewhere between her shame and my longing, the anger I thought I carried dissolved like sugar in tea. Around me the park filled with the ordinary sounds of life, balls bouncing, dogs barking, someone selling corn over a smoky cart. I realized I hadn't noticed those sounds in years. Their normality was a gift. I folded the letter again and whispered into the envelope, "You don't owe me success, Ria. You owe me living." The sodium lamps flickered on fully, painting the park gold. I sat until the chill crept into my bones, then slipped the key and letter inside my blouse pocket close to my heart. On the train home, a child across the aisle leaned on his mother's shoulder, half asleep. The woman stroked his hair absently while checking her phone. I smiled at the sight and, for the first time, didn't feel envy. Love wasn't a competition for attention, it was endurance. When I reached my stop, the driver held the door for me. "Late night, Auntie?" "Maybe the start of a new morning," I answered. Upstairs in my apartment, I placed the letter on the dining table beneath the small lamp. The light pooled around it like protection. I warmed some milk, humming to myself. The tune was old, one Ria used to hum when studying. I hadn't realized I remembered it. Before sleeping, I touched the paper once more and whispered goodnight, not expecting an answer, but feeling curiously as though one had already come. The morning after I read Ria's letter, sunlight poured across my table and touched the paper like a blessing. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch from brightness. I made 2 cups of tea and poured one into the chipped mug I used to keep for her. The second cup went cold, but it didn't hurt anymore. It simply sat there, part of the ritual of remembering without bleeding. I swept the living room and saw walls that had gone dull with waiting. The same cream paint, the same stains behind the clock. Every mark whispered she left you here. So I decided to answer back. I bought 2 cans of paint from Patel's cousin's hardware shop, sunlight yellow for the kitchen, pale green for the living room. For 3 days my apartment smelled of turpentine and change. My arms ached, my back complained, but with each stroke of the brush I felt something lift. Old thoughts drip by drip washed away, replaced by long, slow breaths. Mrs. Fernandez dropped by shaking her head. "You'll ruin your wrist." "I've already done worse to my heart," I joked. She stayed anyway, helping me tape window edges and gossiping about TV dramas. By evening, both of us had paint streaks on our cheeks and laughter leaking out of our conversations. Once the walls dried, the house didn't look haunted anymore. It looked lived in. I hung new curtains like banners of survival. The next week, when Patel's apprentice tore his shirt on a machine, I sewed it neatly. He grinned. "Auntie, you're faster than my tailor." The compliment planted an idea. I made a small signboard from cardboard, "Tailoring lessons, for beginners." Within days 3 young girls from the neighborhood began coming every afternoon. They were 15 or 16, full of noisy energy and teenage perfume. I taught them to thread needles and measure seams, but also how to keep conversation gentle. Between stitches we spoke about school, music, their exams. In their laughter the apartment filled with the kind of noise I had missed, unplanned, carefree. Each evening after they left, I arranged their leftover fabric scraps in a tin box. Small triangles of color, proof that something new was being built. One evening Mr. Patel leaned against my doorframe holding fresh chai. "Your old sadness didn't pay rent either, Auntie. Glad you kicked it out." "Rent raised too high," I smiled. He laughed and left. The tea tasted better than any before. I began walking in the park every morning, not waiting for miracles, just watching the ordinary ones, children racing their shadows, couples sharing roasted corn, an old man reading a tattered novel aloud to himself. I nodded at familiar faces until the nods turned into greetings. At home, I pinned Ria's photo on the newly painted wall. Not the glamorous college portrait, this time the picture from the shelter, the one where her arms circled 2 little children. Every day before leaving for the market, I touched that image gently as though checking its heartbeat. Time started to flow in a different rhythm. I still missed her, but the missing was no longer a wound, it was a thread running softly through my days, connecting rather than cutting. One Saturday I joined Mrs. Fernandez at the community library's reading group. It felt strange to hear my own voice again among people. We read stories aloud, swapped opinions, argued about endings. After so much silence, the sound of conversation felt like sunlight pouring into closed rooms. At night, when I lay down to sleep, my mind no longer replayed the cab driving away. Instead, it replayed laughter from the tailoring class or the swish of a brush across fresh paint. It was as if the house itself sighed with me, content at last. Yet beneath the quiet satisfaction lived a gentle readiness. Ria's letter had said, "If you ever need warmth, use this." I kept the key near the stove, its metal gathering kitchen heat every morning. Sometimes I lifted it between my fingers to remind myself, connection still existed, distance no longer defined us. 3 months passed this way. The walls remained bright, the stitching lessons grew to 6 students, and people called me Teacher Mira instead of Poor Auntie. I liked the new title. It sounded earned. One evening, as the last orange streaks of sunset disappeared, I prepared tea for two once again. Not from habit this time but from intuition, a sense that warmth travels in circles. I placed the second cup across the table and whispered, "Whenever you're ready, Ria, this place has space again, not for pity, but for peace." Then I closed the window, switched on a small radio, and listened to music fill the freshly painted room. Life hummed quietly, beautifully, exactly the way I used to imagine it could be. It happened on a Sunday morning, the kind that begins without expectation. The monsoon had finally rolled away, leaving the air clear and cool. I was trimming wilted leaves from the balcony plants when the doorbell rang. At first I thought it was Mrs. Fernandez, probably bringing her new almond cake for tasting. I wiped my hands on the rag and opened the door. There she was. Ria stood in the hallway, thinner than I remembered yet somehow sturdier. Her hair, once sleek with too much conditioner, was tied simply at the back. She wore pale blue hospital scrubs and carried a canvas tote instead of a handbag. There were faint circles under her eyes, but her gaze was steady. "Hi, Ma." That was all. 2 letters, 1 heartbeat. For a full 5 seconds I couldn't breathe. Every prepared word, anger, tenderness, reproach, stuck in my throat like unchewed rice. My fingers tightened around the rag until it nearly tore. Finally I said, "You found your way." I never lost it. Just took the long route. We both smiled, nervous and awkward, as if meeting at a blind date arranged by fate. She shifted from foot to foot. "May I come in?" I stepped aside wordlessly. The room behind me smelled of detergent and cardamom. The bright walls seemed to greet her louder than I could. Her eyes scanned everything, the new curtains, the girls' sewing posters, the neatly stacked fabrics. "You changed everything," she said softly. "So did you." She laughed once, a short sound half filled with disbelief. "I was terrified you'd slam the door. I practiced that move many times," I admitted. "Didn't feel right in rehearsal." That broke the stiffness. She dropped her tote, and suddenly her arms were around me. Not tight, not desperate, just present. It lasted only a few seconds, but the universe slid into place inside those seconds. I made tea automatically, muscle memory taking over where words failed. We sat at the table, steam rising between us like a bridge being built plank by plank. "I'm working as a nurse now," she said. "At the city clinic near the railway. It's tiring but good. People don't care where you came from when they're in pain. They just hold your hand and trust you. You always had steady hands. And you always trusted too easily," she said, smiling with the gentleness of apology. We drank in silence for a while. Rain clouds gathered in the distance though the day was bright. Finally she looked up. "I read somewhere that some distances need to be walked alone before you can walk back together. And I think I'm home now." I reached across and touched her wrist. Her pulse felt quick, alive. "You can stay for lunch. The cupboard still has room for another plate." Tears filled her eyes without falling. "Thanks, Ma." I took her tote, hung it on the hook by the door where it used to hang years ago. The circle was complete, but smaller, wiser, unbreakable this time. That night the house exhaled differently. The air seemed lighter, as if the rooms had finally forgiven the silence that clung to them for years. Ria was asleep on the old wooden bed, wrapped in my spare blanket. The small lamp cast a soft halo around her face, and I stood at the doorway just watching. Her breathing was slow, peaceful, so ordinary and yet so sacred that it made my throat ache. How many nights had I imagined this same picture? Too many to count. But nothing in my imagination had captured the reality of it, the creases around her mouth, the faint twitch in her fingers, the heartbeat hidden under layers of fabric and forgiveness. I sat by the window with my cup of milk and stared at the moon. The balcony flowers had opened slightly under the silver glow. Cars passed far below, their headlights sweeping briefly across the wall, reminding me that the world outside would keep moving whether we spoke or not. The difference was that now I didn't feel left behind, I finally felt part of it again. 3 years of aching silence had not been wasted. They had carved space in both our hearts for understanding that noise never could have built. I realized that I had learned to live alone, not to prove strength, but to discover peace. I had waited for her to call, but what I truly needed was to learn to listen to myself, to stillness, to the voices I had silenced in trying to be a perfect mother. When dawn's first light filtered through the curtain, Ria stirred. I whispered quietly, "Sleep, Beta. The world can wait a little today." She smiled without opening her eyes, that same mischievous smile from her school days. In that moment, all the missed phone calls, the unanswered birthdays, the years of worry folded themselves neatly into a drawer labeled past. I looked around, freshly painted walls, fabric rolls stacked in color order, mugs drying by the sink. Everything glowed with a humble pride. This small apartment, once so full of loneliness, had become something solid, our shared heartbeat, seasoned with distance and reunion. Sometimes love doesn't shout through daily phone calls or constant messages. Sometimes it hides quietly in the courage to leave, and in the deeper courage to return. Silence isn't always absence, sometimes it's rehearsal for the right words. As the sun edged higher, Ria turned toward the window and murmured, half asleep, "Tea at 7? I laughed softly. "Tea at 7. The clock ticked on, slower, kinder. I felt the morning settle on my shoulders like a shawl woven from peace. After years of waiting, I finally understood the truth: sometimes love grows loud only after years of quiet.